So thanks for inviting me to Building 43, to the real Building 43, Google's Building 43. Who are you?
Hey, thanks for coming, Robert. I'm Patrick Chanezon. I'm a developer advocate at Google, in charge of App Engine, Google Web Toolkit, and HTML5, open web technologies, HTML5 and SVG, all the new stuff that's coming in the client.
So we both have something in common. We both have worked for Vic and Dutra.
Ah, definitely.
Oh, you're working for him right now. I worked for him when he was at Microsoft.
Yeah, and actually I look at you as kind of a model for evangelism and how to evangelize technology.
Yeah. What are you seeing, since you're an evangelist or an advocate, Google likes calling developer advocates because it doesn't sound so religious, right?
Yeah.
But as an advocate, I know what you do, but most people don't know what an advocate is. What does that mean, and why am I interviewing you today?
Sure. So our role is pretty simple. We try to build an ecosystem around Google developer products and APIs. And that means two different kind of things. One of them is public outreach. So we're going to conferences, we're writing articles, we're organizing events, we're going to bar camps. We're really living with the developer community. And the other side of things is more about getting big companies to start using Google developer technologies.
Yeah. So one reason I like to talk to evangelists or advocates is they're on the street. They know the trends. They talk to developers every day and know what's going on. So what is going on in the world from your point of view, from a Google point of view?
Yeah, so from our point of view, what's cooking these days, the kind of big trends, is that in the past 4 years, there's been a build-up of APIs. I don't know if you've seen, I think it's on Read Write Web, or there's one of these sites that lists all the APIs, web APIs. I don't remember at how many there are right now, but it's more than 1,000. Yeah. When I joined Google 4 years ago, there was only one API. It was for AdWords. And right now, even inside Google, we have like 70 APIs that we're talking developers to about. Yeah. So the big trends right now, obviously, it's the real-time web. Yeah. There's also HTML5, which is really big. There's a big fight for rich internet application right now between Silverlight, Adobe Flash, yeah. And then HTML5 and everything that's coming to the browser, and which is in many browsers, I think it's in 30% market share right now. And there starts to be some solutions to make these standards work in IE as well. So there's that. The browser becomes a platform to develop rich internet applications with. Yep. And then on the other side of this equation, you have on the server side, the cloud computing platforms who are really starting to gain ground. More and more developers are using these. And so I like to call the various teams I take care of the client and cloud team, in a reference to the client server era. Because we have a change in the technology paradigm, the way we build apps every kind of 15 years. And right now there's one that's happening this year. So previously you had the mainframe, it was everything on the server side, and then VT100 terminals, and you didn't have any smarts on the client. Those are the
old days.
Those were really the old days for people who still remember that, but that was like 30 years ago.
Sometimes you can still see a piece of that world when you go to a rental car agency or an airline, and you see the very black and white looking screen that's talking to a mainframe, right?
Exactly.
They still haven't changed that much since the
No,
1970s.
Definitely. Although usually when you go to these agencies, you see them inside of an application in Windows.
Yes.
Which leads to there was the second wave with Windows and SQL on the server side, and these were like 15 years ago, the client server days, the 80s, I would say. 80s were all about there's some power on the client side. We're going to build these rich apps on the client that talk to SQL databases. Yeah. And then with the web 93, 95, we went back to the mainframe era. Like we were doing everything on the server side, and the browser was just a dumb client, but with fonts and better images. But that's kind of it. There was no processing power on the client. And what drastically changed this year is that in the past year, between Safari from Apple, Chrome, Mozilla, and Opera, all adopted a standard called HTML5
Yeah.
and implemented an older standard called SVG
Yeah.
that allows for 2D vector graphics. Where
Is that what's playing here, by the way?
So what's playing here is a great example of open web technologies. So in here you have a sound API. It's using the sound API. It's all in JavaScript. It's using Canvas, which allows for 2D vector graphics. It's using the Twitter API, so it's pulling some feeds from Twitter. So if I click there, you'll see it's looking for love HTML5.
Yep.
So it finds all the tweets doing that, and then it's moving, and there's some music playing with it.
And we'll talk about lots of different apps.
Yeah, I can show you demos later.
Yeah.
But basically, there's some power on the client side to do processes with workers that are part of HTML5 to do 2D vector graphics with either Canvas or SVG. In retain mode or building a DOM tree. You have video tag in there, so you can do audio and video, and you have a local database. So what happens right now is that developers are going to start building these much richer apps that would have been built for the desktop 20 years ago. Right now they will be built as web apps.
Yeah.
And in order to reach millions of users, which is made available through all the social layers that allows your app to become much more viral, and this is where social and the real-time web play for these apps. Now you can reach millions of users, but you need to scale on the server side.
Yeah.
And so these cloud computing platforms, at Google we have one called Google App Engine, allow you to scale your app really easily.
Yeah, and Rackspace has one too, and so from that standpoint, we're sort of competitors, right? But not really.
I would see us more as a complementary.
Yeah. So much is happening on the iPhone, and HTML5 is on the iPhone, right?
Yeah, exactly. I often use the iPhone as a demo for the HTML5 features because Safari, the browser that's part of the iPhone, is based on WebKit, the same base that is used for Google Chrome, and they implement the whole range of the specs, so you can use SVG and Canvas and everything on the iPhone.
What is HTML5 for somebody who's living in 1994? What does it let you do, and what are some of the common terms? Like you use Canvas. What does that mean? So,
oh yeah. So HTML5 is essentially a movement around an open standard by many browser vendors to bring capabilities in the browser that were available only to desktop apps before. And it worked really well in this way. So right now in HTML5 you have a tag that's called video. So you just say video, it works like an image tag, source equal, and then you put the
so instead
link
of having
to your video.
having a plugin like Adobe Flash,
So you don't have a plugin,
it's all built standard in the browser.
It's built in the browser, and you have controls in JavaScript to let you script your video. And I'm going to show you amazing demos of doing real-time filtering of videos on the client side. Like for example, for doing green screen effects.
Okay.
There's some marvelous demos where it's all built in JavaScript. I can show you the source, it's 1 page long. But because it's built into the browser, you can use the same technologies you are using to build your regular web apps to build these really powerful applications.
And nobody has to download a plugin.
And there's
like
no plugin involved.
And it works. Does that app work on the iPhone then as well?
It should be the specific one I'm talking about. With video, there's still some codec issues. So I think the video is using the OGG codec.
Got it.
So it won't work on the iPhone, but if you were to use a video that's encoded with H.264, then it would work.
Very
definitely.
cool. Very cool. What else what else is in the spec?
So video is one, audio is another one.
So why use the audio built into HTML5 rather than some other technique?
Some plugin. Because then you can just use existing MP3 files that are out there. It's built into the browser, and you use the same technologies that you're using to process the video or to process your app. It's all HTML, JavaScript, and CSS.
And that's really cool because then if I click play, it'll play on the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this is really cool because I just got a new Prius, and it uses Bluetooth audio with my car stereo. And so now I can click play on the browser and listen to it on my car stereo, right? And I don't even need to download the file and play it in iTunes, which requires a messy web experience.
Yeah, but you need to be connected though for the audio tag.
We're all connected.
Yeah, that's right.
We're here in Mountain View with more Wi-Fi being sprayed on us than anyone else.
Yeah, connectivity is coming everywhere.
Yeah. So what else is
audio, video are kind of show off part of it. But there are some really deep infrastructure parts of HTML5 that will be, I think, even more useful for building apps. Two of them are offline access, where you can build apps that work offline.
Okay.
You can have a local database. So the first time your app
like Google
connects,
Gears?
Google Gears was kind of a draft for HTML5.
Got it.
So it was a draft implementation for the kind of feature that were to be standardized in HTML5. So yeah, exactly.
And you see that used in Gmail and Google Reader, so that you can, if you're on a plane that doesn't have Wi-Fi, you can read.
You can run your app locally, and it works fine.
Okay.
So that's one aspect. Another aspect that's super important. I was telling you about the video processing. You can do some really heavy-duty processing, especially since JavaScript virtual machines have accelerated a lot in the past year.
Yeah.
And so, because of that, but the problem with JavaScript in the current old model of browsers is that you're running in a single thread.
Yeah.
And when you want to do heavy processing, you want to have multiple processes. So that exists with something called workers. That's part of the spec that allows you to run your pieces of JavaScript in different workers that talk to each other.
Wow.
So
how do you debug that?
So this is really so there's some new tools that are being built to debug that kind of apps.
That probably gets messy, a little messy if you're not keeping track of it, what the system's doing.
Exactly. Mozilla has some tools for that. As part of Chrome, there are some developer tools as well. But I would say this is an area that needs to develop over the next year.
Okay.
So that's some pieces of really heavy-duty infrastructure for really rich apps. So you have the VM at the bottom that got faster, you got offline, and then you got workers. Plus you got the audio-video tag that really allows for a more powerful experience. CSS3 has a whole bunch of stuff as well. And two technologies, one called Canvas and one called SVG. So
SVG?
SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics.
Yeah. And that's what's drawing these circles.
So what's drawing these circles is actually Canvas. So Canvas is it's a tag in HTML5. So you say, here's a Canvas element. And then you can get a context out of this canvas in JavaScript, and you can start drawing circles, shapes, gradients. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can do in there, and you can animate that in real time like you see here. So this
if you're
is
building a video game, is this powerful?
For video game, it's fantastic.
Are you seeing video games being developed with it?
Yeah, actually I've even seen, there's one guy who built a great Nintendo Game Boy emulator where you can play the old Pac-Man and all these old games in the browser using Canvas.
Now, on the iPhone, there's so many video games. How many of them are using HTML5?
So I think the iPhone is an interesting platform because they make the choice, the clear choice, to say you go native with us. So we give you the most powerful browser in the industry, but what we're pitching is really Objective-C and the native platform. Android actually has made the same choice with a Java layer on top of the Android systems. What I found really interesting in terms of open web is the approach that Palm took. So you've been at the Palm event last week. Dion Almer and Ben Galbraith have joined Palm from Mozilla, and Dion used to work in that team. He created that team, the open web team at Google initially. And at Palm, what they did is that they said the platform is the web. So they did some extension APIs in JavaScript that gives you access to the device features. So these ones are not standardized yet. But for the rest of it, you just use HTML and JavaScript and Canvas and SVG to create your apps.
That's pretty interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how Palm evolves, because right now it's not as popular as iPhone or Android. Android seems like it's got a lot of developers really interested in it.
So I'm interested to see how the mobile world is going to evolve towards this web development model. I think Palm is really pushing in that direction. Android has an excellent, Android ships with Chrome, and they have an excellent support for web standards as well. So using Open Web Standard is a great option to build your app for Android as well.
Yeah. Now you're also helping developers build Google Web Toolkit, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, you just were showing me Seismic.
Yeah.
we'll show it later
Yeah.
because we can't shoot the screen. But Seismic's the web app of Seismic is built on this Google Web Toolkit. What does that do? And why do I need that as a developer?
So at Google, one of our, since the beginning of APIs at Google, one of our goals was to make the web a better platform to build powerful apps.
Yeah.
And so bit by bit, we attacked the hard problems. And the hard problem with building these rich web apps that are using HTML5 and all these on the client side is it's easy to make a simple app using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. But then in order to make a production app that's completely optimized, there's lots of optimization that you can do there for performance. And to do it at scale, like having 10 people working on the same app, we call that coding in the large.
Yes.
Then you need better tooling, better modularization, and we have a solution called Google Web Toolkit, which is open source. And the idea with Google Web Toolkit, we call it GWT, is that you build your app in Java, and we give you a toolkit that has the basic widgets that you will have in an app, and then Google Web Toolkit compiles it to HTML and JavaScript in an optimized way, and it does a whole lot of optimizations in there. And because it's in Java, it's integrated into Eclipse, so the tooling is really great. You can debug it in Eclipse, so no more debugging in 15 different browsers.
Yeah.
And then when it's compiled to an optimized form of HTML and JavaScript for each platform. So that's what GWT gives you.
Yeah.
And it had a slow adoption, but since last year, we've seen more and more like big apps being built. Seismic Web is a great example. That's not from Google, but even from Google, there's Wave is built using Google Web Toolkit.
Interesting. We haven't even talked about Wave. So.
Yeah. So Wave is really a great showcase of Google Web Toolkit in action.
Okay. Do you have any idea of how people are, or how developers are going to use Wave yet? Because it's so early, but developers are starting to chew on it and seeing that it's a new kind of chat room that they could put into their apps.
I would say the thing that Wave makes me think a lot about is more about Lotus Notes.
Yeah.
It's some kind of a new collaboration paradigm. It's email reinvented, and I think there's a lot of potential for developers in two different areas. One of them is or three different areas. One of them is just to use it to collaborate with people about their apps. Another one is to build Wave robots. There's an API for Wave where you can enhance the experience. And actually, we see lots of developers starting to build App Engine apps, robots for Wave.
Yeah.
So that's one angle that we see developing.
No, the robots are pretty cool. They do all sorts of stuff. Like even post to Twitter, there's a little bot.
Yeah, they post to Twitter. They can translate what you're typing in real time.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of collaboration potential in there. And then the last aspect, which is I think very important, is that Wave, the protocol is open source.
Yeah.
So the protocol is an open protocol that's supposed to work in a federation. So you could imagine that IBM or Microsoft would build their own Wave servers, and you could interoperate between the Google Wave version with the Microsoft Wave implementation or IBM.
Yeah.
So I think they shipped an open source version of the server implementation already, so developers should really take a look and start playing with that. Moreover, from a more intellectual perspective for a developer, Wave is using something really interesting called OT for real-time interaction in a really efficient way, and that's an interesting algorithm to study. So I really recommend you to go take a look at it.
It's called OT?
OT, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll check that out. Anything else that you want to talk to us about today?
Sure, App Engine. We see a big move to the cloud, and we have this cloud computing platform called App Engine that is really very easy to deploy to.
Now, how does that do? Because Rackspace has one and Amazon has one. Why would a developer choose Google's App Engine? It's free,
App Engine
right?
platform. It's not only that it's free. There's 5 million page views that are free, so it's free to get started trying it out. But if your app is super successful, like above 5 million page views per month, we have a bidding option where you can pay for quota, for bandwidth and all that. I think the main differentiator with other platforms like Rackspace or Amazon is we took a completely different approach. With other computing platforms, cloud computing platforms, Amazon is a typical case where you can book some servers and some storage, and they give you all the various pieces, and you assemble your scalable platform by yourself.
Yeah.
Like you can use MySQL and you have to shard it by yourself, and it's a lot of work. At Google, what we did is that we said, this is the infrastructure that we're using for our own apps. We're going to take more of a top-down.
Called Bigtable, right?
So Bigtable, yeah. So there's GFS, Google File System. On top of it, there's Bigtable. On top of it, there's a Google web server. And so we wrapped all that into simple APIs in two languages, in Python and Java.
Yeah.
And we try to use standards APIs and frameworks like Django, and for Java it's GDO or GPA. And then you develop your app in Python. You click a button, you push it to the Google server, we take care of scaling for you.
Yeah.
So there are some limitations to that, which is if a developer is really hung up of using MySQL or even a SQL database, Google App Engine is not for them because Bigtable has certain limitations. It's a very different data model. But then if you're willing to go with this new way of designing your data model, that buys you a lot because we just scale it for you. You have 10 users or you have 10 million users, it works the same. And you don't have to wake up at night to manage your servers. So I'd say
that's why I don't see us as really competitive, because
that's it.
Most businesses want to have the portability of being able to move their servers or scale or do things. And that's why Rackspace is so useful there, right? Because you can buy your own servers, you can buy a cloud server, and you have choice, right? You can move off, move on.
It's a different approach. But about moving off, there starts to be the Google App Engine developer kit is open source. And so there are some people, I think it's called AppScale, who started to offer the same APIs as Google App Engine, but into another cloud. So if you want to move off, you can use their offering.
Very cool.
And I hope that there will be around that open source implementation, like some really scalable offerings where you could host it in your own private cloud if you wanted to.
Very cool. So what kind of businesses are you seeing affected by all this? Are you seeing like restaurants or car manufacturing companies using any of the new stuff that you're trying to work with developers on, or is it just the newer startups like Seasmac who are using it?
So there's a whole range of them. We see App Engine especially being used for mobile apps, a lot for social apps like BuddyPoke or iPoke. Social apps tend to have lots of users very quickly, and so they love that auto-scaling capabilities that App Engine provides them. You can
what
see
about HTML5, where Google Web Toolkit use the whole range of things you're talking about?
So Google Web Toolkit and HTML5, this is more. So Google Web Toolkit has been around for quite a while now, and so there are some startups in the enterprise space, for example, who are using it. There's myerp.com who offers a cloud-based ERP who's using Google Web Toolkit. For HTML5, it's a little bit early for like big companies to use it, so I've seen mostly startups. You have to understand that HTML5 really happened in the past year.
Yes.
So the time is ripe for right now. This is the technology to take a look at today.
Okay.